we're back on the roof. I'm going to do a quick tutorial for you guys. I'm going to show you how we do condenser coil cleaning out here. We got a bunch of units we're doing the condenser coil cleaning on today. I'm going to show you guys what I'm using. I'm going to go show you guys what we do. This is kind of the way everybody here I can think of chemically cleans condenser coils, but I want to make sure that if you are out there doing it, you understand what has to happen, what you need to look for, and do it right, and don't tear up your coil, don't have any issues with creating any leaks on your coil, and using the right chemical on the right coil. And what we're going to show you today, or go over today, is just tube and fin, and this guy's going to help me out here. So let's get to cleaning the coil. All right, so what we're going to be using is a coil gun. Coil gun, you can get these at most HVAC supply houses. All right, this coil gun right here pre-mixes your water, your solution, to a desired amount, anywhere I think down from 50 to 1 all the way to probably like 25 or 15 or 35 to 1. There are a few settings on this. There's A, that's your strongest setting. B, that's your next strongest setting. C, E is your weakest setting. And then this last one here is just strictly water. Pretty much everything we do in terms of this coil gun and cleaning everything coil-wise, I'd say probably A to C, correct? Am I right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's A to C. So on a coil like this, when you look at a coil like this, it doesn't look terribly dirty. All right. What you can do with a coil like this before you get started, first thing is to make sure you kind of have an idea as to how the coil is designed. How many rows is it? How thick is it? You know, how much water pressure do you have when you're going to clean this thing off? Are you going to be able to get through it or not? Because what we're using right here, New Bright Blue, which is probably the best stuff for aluminum, right? New Bright Blue is very, very strong. You know, people that have been doing this are going to be like, yeah, I know it's strong. I got a brain, I know how to clean coils. But some of these newer guys or somebody who hasn't done this before might, want to know how to do this. Even some guys in residentially, homeowners, or if they're looking to do it themselves, New Bright Blue is probably the strongest stuff you can get that we use to clean aluminum coils and get the dirt out of these things. But knowing what kind of coil you're working with is very important before you actually do anything. One of the reasons is because if you have a treated coil that has any sort of a corrosion resistance material over top of it, or a heat transfer coating over it, which is typically black, you don't want to use this stuff. It will take it off. It will affect your heat transfer. It will affect your corrosion resistance if it has anything like that on it. So you want to be aware of something like that. In the case of this coil, we're just going to be cleaning it off with this stuff now, and showing you what the results are and what you get when you clean them off. Now, one of the things I like to do with a coil like this, get an idea as to what size it is, how deep it is, how many rows it is, and sometimes if the coil is split, train units will actually split the coils to where you have one coil, which is one pass, and then another coil that's layered on top of it. So it's not actually one solid row of aluminum, it's actually two. So your sweater or dirt and dust that build up in this thing can actually hide behind the first row of coil right here where you won't see it. So looking at this coil, it actually looks pretty clean, but when we go to clean it, you're going to see some stuff come out of it, more than likely. How do you know that? If you can get in between the rows of these coils here and actually spread some of the fins apart, just in a small area, some spots like right here. If you look down here, I've done it right, up here. So right here, you can actually get in and get a flashlight in there and see some of the dust that's in there. And that's what we're looking to try to get out. Maybe not necessarily the stuff that's on the face of the coil, because that's obvious. When you come up here and you see this thing look like a sweater or a rug, obviously it needs to be chemically clean. But the stuff down inside, you want to try to get that out, because that can affect you just as bad on a 90, 95, or 100 plus degree day. So one of the things that is also important when cleaning the coil off like this is being sure to get all the cleaner off of it when you're done. All right, getting into the coil, getting as much of it penetrated with this cleaner as you can, foam through, and then getting as much of it off of it as possible. All right. Note, pro tip, engineers, residential people, do not use chemical pump sprayers to put this kind of chemical on these coils. It will not get down deep enough inside of them. It doesn't have the force to get through a coil that's more than probably about an inch thick. So if you have a coil that's 3-4 passes or 2 layers of coil deep, you're not going to get where you need to be. So we're going to show you what I do right here with this gun and how we spray this thing off. Real simple, pre-mixes, you're going to spray it on, just get full coverage on it. And what you're going to see is the reaction of the coil and the dirt and the aluminum itself, and what happens. Because a dirty coil, a coil that's coated with something or something that, you know, has actually, you know, started to affect heat transfer, you won't see the aluminum react. You won't see this chemical foam. When the chemical reacts to the aluminum, it actually foams up. So when you see this chemical product go on here, what you might see is nothing happen at all. Now it will break down the dirt and it will break down the first layer of junk that's on this coil, but you might actually require a second pass with this thing to see it react to where it foams up. When it foams up, that's when the coil likes to get in between the different sections, the different slats or the fins, and that's when you're going to start doing more work. And in some cases, depending on the thickness of coil, you may actually have to pressure wash this coil from the inside or from the outside to help push the dirt that's inside of it out. If you have enough dirt on the face of this coil before you start to even vacuum it off first. What you want to try to avoid when chemically cleaning any coil is leaving dirt or portions of little, you know, essentially rolled up and matted dirt that, you know, occurs when you clean this thing up to be stuck or pushed farther into the coil where they're harder to get. Now, New Bright does a really good job of dissolving dirt. I mean, it pretty much just comes out as a dirty, soupy mess. And you don't generally see chunks of anything coming out. But when you start to see chunks of something, heavy pollen and dirt and things like that build up, and you're pushing that into the coil, you could be making things worse. So that's why it's always a good idea to get an idea or to figure out what kind of coil you have to work with before you actually start chemically cleaning it to know what to clean it with. And going back to your pressure or your thermally treated or corrosion resistant coils, certain coils like that, defer to your manufacturer of chemical treatment or to the unit as to what you should be using on a coil of that type. Typically anything that's soap and water, dish soap and water can work for things like that. Degreasers, maybe a heavy degreaser. And then obviously if you're getting into microchannel coils, you know, for the most part you want to try to use as little as possible on those because those will just waste away and then you're going to have refrigerant leaks and need a new coil. So I'm going to pick up a gun here. We're going to go over this thing real quick. And what you want to make sure of is that you have good pressure. If you do not have good water pressure when you are doing this, all right, you will not get a good foam. You will not get good penetration into this coil. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking to get into this coil far enough that you can clean it out without having to use a pressure washer and just use chemicals. If you need to use a pressure washer, or you don't think you're getting enough penetration through this coil to get to the dirt or push the dirt out after it's been cleaned, then you need to get a pressure washer up on the roof. All right. That would technically be the very correct way of doing it. If every time you get a pressure washer and hose and electrical up on the roof and everything else, but that is not always the case. So with this chemical, we hopefully do 90 to 99% of what we need to do with this coil cleaning. Okay. Now, in areas where you can see, like this, where there's no reaction, okay, this is probably a dirty spot. Now, everything over here where you can see dirt coming out of it and you can also see this reaction, that's actually the aluminum reacting to this product, is what I've seen. So, in certain areas like this, when you go to clean this thing off and rinse it off, when you go over this thing again for any reason you needed to, this area right here would actually probably start to foam up the second time I go around it. So, but this is what we like to see, is everything kind of foaming up, looking really nice and clean. Now there's nothing inside in terms of the foam that you can see that's penetrated through. Now when I spray this thing out, we might be able to see water passing through the coil from my gun. And what I like to do is take this nozzle off, okay, which is the attachment nozzle for this quick disconnect. And I like to take that off and use this hose end just to spray this off, because you can get a nice fan control with this hose and actually clean this coil off really well. One of the things you don't want to do is start folding fins over. Pay attention when I said initially, you know, you want to figure out what kind of coil you have. Some manufacturers' coils very thin fins. They get bent over really easily. They fold over and then you have to comb them out, or they just wind up being a mess when you're done with it. They just look crappy, they look terrible. So we're only going to let this stuff sit on here for probably about a minute or two. Okay? It does not need a lot. When you put this stuff on here in this mixed form, and I'm at level C, which is not terribly strong, okay? you're going to rinse this thing off relatively quickly, and you want to do that because you don't want any of the stuff on this coil to dry. Okay, you want this stuff to stay wet, and by the time it's getting close to drying out and it's done its work, you need to rinse it out. So right about now, kind of is where we need to rinse it out. It's done its work, it's foamed up, so now we're going to rinse. All right. And what you want to try to do, if your coil is angled in any way, focus your water on getting through that coil as much as you possibly can. So pushing through the areas of the coil between the tubes of the coil so you can get in and push any of the chemical that's in there out and get this thing 100% rinsed off, free from any chemical that's in there. All right. So it's nice and clean and there isn't any dirt sitting inside of it. And one of the things you can do, there are attachments for these units, or for these mixing tools, to where you can put a wand down through the top of it and actually spray it out from the inside too. If you so desire, you can go in through the back side, pretty much do the same thing that we're doing right here, and hit it from both ends. At that point, you might just want to use a pressure washer, but this usually works. I said 99% of the time, this is all you need to do. Okay? And we're going to rinse this off a little bit more, but one of the things I'm going to do is look down inside of this thing when I'm rinsing this thing off. And I can see water actually passing through the coil, which means I can see the actual chemical being pushed out in areas where it's still hanging out. But this also means that the chemical that's in there, I'm getting enough penetration with just the water pressure out here to be able to do the job that I need to do. All right? And you can see, it's hard to tell, but this area here still doesn't have a luster or a shine or an aluminum finish because this was dirty. This front face right here has a much more aluminum look to it, and that's because this area right here was reacting the most. This is where the aluminum is reacting, okay? Now, the other thing we're gonna do, and this is important for residential equipment or anybody that's doing residential units at their house or for customers or what have you, especially older units. You get into a unit that's older, a few years old, 8, 10 years old, and train equipment for residential is all spline fin tubing, kind of important for them as well. All right. One of the things that you want to take a look at is what the inside of the unit looks like when about you're done cleaning. All right. When we get into the inside of this unit, what you're going to see in some cases, depending on the design of the unit, is you're going to see a coil with a bunch of chemical foam sitting all over the bottom of it. Now that chemical foam, if you leave that in there and that foam is high enough, it will eat into that bottom row of coils, and that bottom row of tube will start to develop leaks because the copper is going to wear out. All right, so what you want to make sure of is when you're done with this unit, any other unit, residential unit, commercial, doesn't matter. You're going to want to try to get into an area like this where this might hold some of that leftover chemical, because that's all that foam is, and you're going to want to try to rinse and spray this stuff out like we're going to do when we're done with this one. And that will prevent you from corroding that aluminum and that copper and developing leaks. And if you look in here, this is where our two coils are, so you can even move them apart. So this is 2 rows of coils right here. So you have 1 row of coil that's 1 pass, and then another pass that's a whole separate pass. So that space in between those 2 coils is where that dirt likes to trap with these units. And you can't see it when you're looking at it from the outside, but I guarantee you when you go to pull them apart or pull this unit apart at some point in time when this thing, you know, hits the scrap yard, you will see a bunch of dirt on that coil in between the 2. So hopefully that helps any of you guys that are out there. Once every year or so, I get a job or a call somewhere where a unit's tripping off on head pressure. Unfortunately, it's not very often. And I just run into a job where somebody says, you know, I chemically cleaned the coil just last month. I don't know what the problem is. And I ask them, what did you clean the coil with? And they take out that pump sprayer or that spray bottle of some sort of chemical that they have, and it could be this stuff. And they go, yeah, I sprayed it off with this. And I go, well, how'd you rinse it off? And they go, well, I just put water in that bottle, same bottle, and I rinsed it off. And it's just not enough. So this should hopefully get you where you need to be to get your coils clean for some smaller commercial stuff like this, even all the way up to larger commercial, like I said, with a pressure washer. And even for your residential guys or homeowners who are needing to clean up their coil. I just did my neighbor's coil, and he'd never done it in 8 or 10 years. Get to as much of the coil as you can. Be sure you can see as much of it as you can. Clean as much of it as you can safely and with the product the way it was designed to be used. And hopefully you'll have good luck with your air conditioning equipment in the future. So thank you guys for your time. Appreciate it. Y'all have a great day.